Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Dennis Carroll. Yes, it is time for the North American Dogman Project science team to once again join StarFox here in the Fox Den on this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy. Ooh, that was really delicious. A tad bit messier than preferred. Yet no worries, I'll clean it up later.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back once again to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. We sit down by the late night fire and burn the timber in an attempt to read a few chapters out of the Midnight Society book and figure out what is occurring across the United States. We have a member of our science team. Yes, it's time to nerd out once again, which is one of my favorite times. Dennis Carroll is sitting down again to blow our minds. How you doing tonight, man?
All right, how's everything going?
It's good to sit down and link up with you again, and just been pretty busy, my friend. Just got done doing an episode with one of my really good friends and host, Barb Hartman, and I've been watching the Bruins, a little bit of football, editing, waiting to link up with you, and grinding away, man. What about you?
Oh yeah, I keep busy doing my podcast. Did a great show last night. I got one planned for Saturday night. Got one planned for Friday night, so I stay busy.
This is great. I know, man. I actually got a chance to pop in and check out you and Jessica the other day because usually whenever I wake up, if I see she's on, because she's one of my hosts as well, I always got to make sure to support her back. I pop in and I was like, yeah, that's Dennis too. I literally just crawled up out of my coffin, man. It was probably like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I'm always up super late at night. It just goes back to me being an actor and model, man, and I don't know, the nightlife and just being up late. I just get energized at nighttime, dude. I don't know why, man. It's just who I am. So during the day, I'm a little bit more sluggish, but up at night, I'm usually up to like 2 or 3, just editing, grinding away, learning and such. So yeah.
I know how that late night stuff goes. I do most of my writing and research late at night. I burn a lot of midnight oil. And I've got a double header for you tonight. We're gonna talk about the werepire and the boo hag.
Man, that's great stuff. Before we dive into that, would you like to give yourself a plug, explain to the audience what you're about? I mean, obviously, I'm going to have all your links up there, and people that do follow us should know that we collaborate all the time. But if we have some new listeners tonight, we definitely want to let them know what you're up to, man.
Okay, you can find me on Hunting the Shadows. That's every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I also have another show on Monday nights at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time called The Road Less Traveled, and another podcast at Friday night, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time called Paranormal Point of View. You can find me at denniswcarroll.com. You can mail me at denniswcarroll@gmail.com. And I can be reached in either one of those locations.
You hear that, my friends? So yes, if you do have any things or issues that potentially you feel that Dennis could help you out with, make sure to contact him. He, again, is part of the North American Dogman Project Science team. He is also one of my hosts here at Midnight Lycanthropy. One of my friends, great guy, does great stuff. And yes, our science team and everybody we work with is accessible to anybody. So whether it's myself or Dennis or anybody else you see on here, if we can help you out, make sure to let us know. And Dennis, I'm gonna throw you the mic so you can blow some people's minds, man.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things, and as an old monster hunter myself, I find it very interesting when you run into what I call hybrids of things. And one of the strangest hybrids of all would definitely be the werepower. Now, the werepower is actually a hybrid of a werewolf and a vampire. Here's the interesting thing in folklore. You have something called a downfire. Now, a downfire is a human being who is half human and half vampire. But when that half human side gets cursed by the curse of the virus of the werewolf and becomes a werewolf, he still remains and retains his vampire state, werepower. And that it would be one of the most dangerous creatures of the supernatural variety that you could ever run into.
Dang, that is gnarly right there for sure. And I don't know, obviously, the most about the occult and things because you're pretty much my go-to on that stuff. And I was actually telling Barb about that because she is very interested about a lot of stuff like that too. And I was like, yeah, you definitely got to ask Dennis anything along the lines of that because he's going to be able to give you a pretty solid answer. But the question I would like to ask is, would you probably classify that entity as something that would again maybe have to come from some sort of occult manifestation, like we had spoken about before, to even get to that point?
Absolutely. You know, it is a definite deep tie into what we know as demonic power. That's how these things get their juice. That's where they hook up to this power and get their occultic and supernatural abilities. Um, if you had something such as a vampire, which would be a have werewolf, half vampire thing, you would have a very hard time killing this thing in two different ways. So you could either approach it as a werewolf or you could approach it as a vampire. But here's the problem: if you kill the werewolf with that half of it, that's the vampire. So you got a very interesting conundrum on your hands.
Yeah, I could see how that could be quite a little bit of an issue. Do you think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, fire seems to always work on everything, correct? I mean, I don't really know much about the occult and stuff, but I mean, from stuff that I have learned about, it seemed like people, when they thought they were dealing with vampires and such, they set them on fire too. So if you were to per se set it on fire, I mean, that's got to be a pretty good way to get rid of it, right?
That's true. The way the basic way you destroy a vampire, you can stake him, and you know, by the way, the wood that you use is hawthorn wood. You can stake him, but what that is basically is a temporary, answer to your problem. The thing is, you've got to pin him to the earth or pin him into his grave in order to do what you need to do next, which is to decapitate him and then burn him. You have to burn him to ashes. That is the only true way that you lay a vampire.
Interesting stuff right there for sure. So let's say if I guess you and I were out and about and we were able to somehow take whether I guess it was a werewolf or a cynocephaly or the entity you just spoke about, and we were able to light it on fire, what do you think would be the outcome of that?
It would not be good. Definitely not, because uh, when you combine two supernatural entities like this, you get a supernatural power out of them. It's sort of like, they're on steroids kind of a thing. They have even tremendous amount of power because you're not only dealing with the werewolf side, you're dealing with the vampire side of it as well. So as we know that vampires have the ability to do many things. They can shapeshift into different things like bats or fogs or rats or whatever the situation is. They supposedly can shapeshift into these things. The werewolf usually doesn't shapeshift into anything but a werewolf. That's the way it goes. So you're looking at something that would be a supernatural creature.
Dang, nightmare fuel right there. And
Yeah.
you and I, yeah, I've spoken about before how like I'm a nerd, and you were saying you like to nerd out with some topics too. So I'm gonna bring up something obviously, as far as I know, is fictional, has nothing to do with any sort of historical aspects, but Underworld, right? Cool concept in that movie for sure. But it seemed like they were in the direction that the vampires were a little bit more intellectual than meaning the werewolves. Seemed like they were able to outsmart them to use them more, whereas in conflict though, didn't really seem like the vampires stood the most chance in the one-on-one, I guess. I mean, it didn't seem like they were afraid.
You bring up a very good point there.
Yes, that would
The
make me
werewolf.
wonder, would the werewolf or vampire in that situation win, do you think?
Mhm. Well, the werewolf has the mind of a man. That's what makes him so dangerous. He has a reasoning ability of that of a man more than an animal. But you got to remember this about the werewolf. The true full-blown werewolf is very psychotic. In other words, he has given into a supernatural rage that takes him far beyond the mentality. Now, you look at the vampire, he can be more subtle in the way he does things. He can be smarter, and that's the way he survives. The smartest vampires are the oldest vampires because they have learned how to truly survive in this world. But they have their wits about them in that respect. The werewolf, on the other hand, is very much uncontrollable in its outlook. The vampire is controlled, whereas in the werewolf isn't.
That's great. You know what that makes me think about again, a nerdy reference. It's kind of like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, or like the Bruce Banner Hulk kind of aspect, right? Because I mean, when you got like the Hulk or I mean Mr. Hyde, they're going crazy, but then, Bruce Banner and Dr. Jekyll have a little bit more of their wits to it. So yeah, that would seem to make a lot of sense, like you were saying, that in the shadows and such, it would be easier for, I guess, say the vampire to infiltrate things and kind of go undetected. Whereas, like you were just saying with a werewolf, I don't think it cares about going undetected. It's just like, yo, I'm here to mess stuff up.
Sure. And the older the vampire gets, I'm talking about thousands of years old, the older it becomes, the less human it retains its humanity. It doesn't retain its humanity that long. It becomes more like a monster. It is definitely very much like a bat thing, more so than the human. It doesn't look human anymore. It loses that humanity the older it stays. And I think it is the supernatural power that does this to it. It changes its very molecular structure eventually over time. And like I've talked about the werewolf before, the werewolf who has to put on the belt, he has to have that dark power to change into the werewolf, can only do so many times before he loses his humanity and stays a permanent werewolf.
That makes a ton of sense right there, definitely. And obviously, I guess this is again throwing like a dart at the wall, but would you describe the look of a vampire and werewolf more in this regards or in the latter half of this? So would the vampire look more like Nafaratu in that original vampire depiction, or would it be more glamorous, like the women would be sexy, the men would look like Christian Bale in American Psycho? And same thing with like the werewolf now. How does that look? I mean, does it look more like per se the American Werewolf in London? Does it look more like the Wolfman? Does it look more like Underworld? I mean, or does it look more like some of the other depictions of it, I guess? Or are
Well,
they
here's
even
the
close?
thing. Here's the interesting thing about that, Kenny. When they retain the vampire state for so long, they truly become, like I said, more monstrous looking. But they can use the glamour on you to keep you from seeing what their true image is. They can make themselves look very attractive to you, whether you're female or male, whatever the situation. They can attract you and lure you that way in their power. And that's why, very much like demons, demonic demons, you never look them in the eyes. The same thing with vampires and werewolves. You never look any kind of a supernatural creature in its eyes, because that is where its true power lies, in its eyes. And I have that old saying, the eyes are the windows of the soul. You're looking into demonic power, and that can change you. It can mesmerize you. It can get you in their power very quickly, and you might be in a very dangerous situation when that happens. And the same thing with the werewolf. The longer they retain the werewolf thing, eventually it begins to show up in there when they're human, when they look like you and I. Some attributes begin to show up. You may have a unibrow. You may have the hair in the palms of the hand. You have that animal instinct and look about you that normal human beings don't have. It begins to show up. So it becomes very hard for the vampire and the werewolf to eventually hide their true nature. This is very prevalent with all demonic type entities.
That's great that you just said that because for a little bit now, we have been trying to work on a hypothesis here at the North American Dogman Project that same thing with skinwalkers, that sometimes they might just be controlling the narrative of what you're seeing, like the glamour, about how afterwards these people say that they saw a very old, decrepit, indigenous looking man or woman, but at first they saw what looked to be some crazy looking wolf or something. And I wonder if same thing, kind of like the glamour effect, was it just showing that to the people that saw it to scare them, and its actual form was the elderly man or woman? And same thing like with what you were referring to, is it that hideous form or is it showing you something that is more appealing?
That's very true, and that goes with the other creatures we were talking about as well. I've been on the trail of skinwalkers, and I've hunted them several times. And I'm gonna tell you in a few minutes about the skin stealer. This is a very interesting thing too. But anyway, what I was gonna say about this before we get into that is that the werewolf and the vampires and other such supernatural creatures like that eventually give themselves away. Their true nature will show. The mask will slip sometimes, and you see what's really there. But if you're under the glamour of these things, you don't see that. And here's the thing you got to remember, okay? When it comes to dark and black magic, it is basically a way of contorting and twisting and bending true reality to the way you want it to be. That's what all dark magic is about, changing reality.
That would make sense. And distortion kind of ties into what you were just bringing up with the glamour or with what I had suggested with the skinwalker. So that is definitely very intriguing for sure. And you have some more gnarly information that I'd love to hear too, bro.
Oh yes, and that brings us to the boo hag, which we have here in the state of where I live, the state of South Carolina. The boo hag is a skin stealer. It is sort of like the skinwalker in many ways, and like a vampire in other ways. But what it can basically do, it is a witch that can take off her skin and then steal your skin and look like you and impersonate you with other people and lure those people into her power. And she feeds by feeding off of the very life essence of your soul. She is a very dangerous entity, the blue hag. She's also called the old hag or whatever. And she can also, when she rides you, and it's called being ridden, she sits on your chest and she mesmerizes you. She paralyzes you and then begins to feed off of your life essence. And the only way you can keep the boo hag off of you is to either throw salt on her, because then she can't get back into her regular skin, supposedly. And then another remedy, very much like the vampire, is you leave a broom in the room. So she has to stop and count the straws in that broom, and that should hopefully give you a chance to make it till daylight without being attacked. But there are other remedies supposedly with the boo hag too, and one of the main ones is to paint your window frames blue. We call it haint blue. That stands for haunt. Haint blue is an actual color palette that you can paint that keeps these evil spirits, like the boo hag, out of your house and away from you.
Gnarly messed up stuff right there too. And I wanted to ask you actually two questions. Where do you think the whole counting aspect came from? Meaning, I've just heard some interesting stuff that it is almost, I guess, a little bit comedic to think that this massive, gnarly Rougarou and such can just dominate. But then you leave, I can't remember how many coins or things outside, and it can't count past a certain amount of things, so it spends all night counting. That just, wait a second. So this thing's here to dispose of you, but then it just sits there counting pennies outside?
They represent getting an obsessive nature. They have a very obsessive nature. They're obsessed with blood. They're obsessed with stealing your energy. And I think the interesting thing is that they they go about this in different ways. These entities do, but yet it still all has the same outcome in the way that they do this. And that's the dangerous aspect of all this. And when you look at something like the boo hag, is they can steal your skin and then go around and impersonate you and lure your relatives or your friends into being used by this. That is not good. That is like a skinwalker, only a step up from that. Worse in nightmare terms. Absolutely.
That is gnarly for sure. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lilith is supposed to basically be the mother of vampires. Am I correct? And she sounds a little bit about kind of like the entity you were just speaking about. Do you think there's any occurrences or coincidences or relations there?
Well, you're thinking about Lilith, who was supposed to be the mother of demons, the mother of vampires and witches and stuff like that. She was, of course, supposed to be Adam's first wife, and she would not submit to Adam, and so she was thrown out of the Garden of Eden and cursed by God. She is supposedly mentioned in the Bible as a night monster, which is the old, I think, English terminology for an owl. So her symbol is an owl. And she is considered to be the mother of all demons. That includes vampires. And her other name is definitely her other name that you're thinking about is not only Lilith, but I think Camilla is another name that she uses. She uses several different names, but she is known to be supposedly the goddess of these things.
Yes, excellent right there. And the reason I had asked that is just because I had heard of an intriguing, scary, gnarly, whatever terminology people would like to use, of encounters or stories where people were summoning her to try and become a vampire, more or less. And that's why I was asking you if she would be the one, I guess, that would be presenting herself, or she would have maybe a lesser demon, because someone did recently inform me that she, besides the crispy man himself, is actually one of the highest powered demons that exists.
Well, you can go up the rung on the ladder of this dark witchcraft or satanic stuff, whatever name you want to give it. It is very dark, dark. I call it the dark arts. And if you go up the ladder, the more power you obtain. You can take the form of a wolf. You can take the form of a bat. You can take the form of a werewolf. You can be a vampire. You can be a tiger. The list goes on and on. But the more horrific things you do, the more you go deeper into league with these demonic forces, the darker and the more darkness you become. Okay. And here's what I've said this before: there is a darkness inherent in all of us. We all have a dark side to us. And this demonic darkness that's outside in the world is always trying to hook into that darkness that's in you and me. And whenever it does that, it can pull us deeper into the darkness to the point where we actually lose our humanity and our souls. But you have to do horrific things to obtain this power. I won't get too deep into this, but it is bad, bad, gnarly stuff.
Yeah, that is some pretty messed up stuff right there for sure. And That also, again, as you were just speaking about that, intrigues me because there is definitely a lot of depictions and encounters or stories about supposedly, Lilith being with wolves and such, and you were just referring to that, and makes me wonder if that, I mean, we already know the occult's tied in, but I wonder if she might be one of the more ones that's tied in with the vampiric and werewolf side, if that makes sense. Because I mean, again, I don't know the most about occult, but it seems like with some of the lesser demons and such, they're not ones that are rolling out as the vampires and like the werewolves and such. So like you were saying, that's kind of like the top notch, more or
The, the
less.
main the main one over that would be Lamia. Lamia is supposed to be sort of the go-to for vampires and werewolves. She is sort of the connection for the monsters in our world. She is supposed to be also another queen of demons. And here's the thing about all this stuff. When you get into this stuff very deep, you understand that people are actually calling up these demons from the darkness and talking to them and making deals and signing contracts with them to obtain these things, such as money, power, politics, fame, celebrity. The list goes on and on and on. And also, one more thing you're bargaining for. And you're trying to get it through like being like a werewolf or vampire, and that is immortality.
That again is creepy as heck. And that leads me into my next question too, is do you think, because I actually am starting to think myself that the White Devil or the Dirty Stash, which we all know who I'm trying to refer to, his right-hand man was Heinrich Himmler. Okay, that should right there tell people who I'm trying to mention. But he himself, a lot of people don't realize, is more of a puppet kind of when it came to a lot of the stuff, like occult stuff, was Heinrich Himmler's, interest and such. And he was a big pusher of that. And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that the SS and the Dirty Stash and Heinrich Himmler, that obviously it's hard to throw out a number, but potentially 80% less, maybe more of the paranormal darkness, do you think they are the ones that are responsible for this?
I think so to a certain extent. Like these people that are making these deals and dark contracts, a lot of times don't realize what it is. And I've actually seen people in certain situations that were afraid to sign contracts because I think there was some other deal in the background on it. But the interesting thing about all of this, like with Heinrich Hitler and all the rest, they were out for power. And that's what it's all about. That's the game. Power. If you have power in this world, you will obtain money. Money and power are the same thing, okay? And with that, you can do just about anything. If you have enough money, if you and I had enough money, we could actually extend our lives because we would get the best medical care, the
Yep.
best medicine out there. We would have the money. When you have the money, you can do anything, and you can live in a level above other people. But yet, when you do this kind of a thing, you tend to lose that humanity, I said. You lose that feeling for other people. People become pawns to you. They're not human beings anymore. And this is when you fall into the very dangerous territory. When you lose your humanity and your soul, you become less than human. You're not really human anymore to that extent.
100%, man. And that's why I wanted to get your insight on that. And actually, that made something else pop into my brain. When it comes to a serial unaliver, do you think it's a person that is just doing it out of, say, sheer enjoyment? Like, obviously, it's not real, but in American Psycho, okay? He was a functioning citizen in society, which obviously there's going to be people like that. There are, people can look it up. And, good looking dude, great job, women loved him. Well, you look at the movie, what he was doing. He didn't seem to, quote unquote, be like possessed or something. I mean, he was doing his unaliving in very articulate ways. But I guess what I wanted to ask is, When it comes to the majority of, say, some of these serial unalivers and some of these horrendous people, do you think they were possessed, or do you just think it's the dark side of humanity without any sort of possession?
Oh, absolutely. I've looked into the eyes of several sort, and looking back was not what was not human. It didn't look. It looked. It's like looking in the dark black eye of a shark. There was no emotion there, no feeling at all. And I think there is an outside darkness, like I said earlier, that attaches to that darkness already inherent in us. And when it does, that's what draws us deeper into that darkness to the point where we disassociate ourselves. That's what when you talk about these serial unalivers, as you want to call them, they are people that are disassociated. They're no longer members of the human race. They think the world is against them. They are true loners. They go out, they have isolated themselves from all feeling and interaction between human beings. They are disassociated to a great degree. And they do that but that is the way demonic possession works. It disassociates you from humanity and anybody that can help you or any solution to your problem because it wants to get you in the proverbial corner where it wants you to be so that it can work on you and take full possession of you, which is, I think, what happens with a lot of these serial.
Jeez, yeah, that's some straight up gnarly stuff right there for sure. And yeah, you know how it is. Unfortunately, YouTube isn't big on some of the terminologies. So, Jessica actually was one to show me some words like serial unalive, etc. But that would make sense. I mean, and it really just ties into some of the gnarly, crazy stuff that, does occur and what people are doing. And at the end of the day, I mean, Heinrich Himmler and them had their hands on what we know of at the moment, 13,000 occult books. That's just what we know of, okay? And that was just recently found in a Czech bunker. So, I mean, there definitely has to be plenty of other areas like that we still haven't found. And I mean, just also recently, one of the SS high up individuals that was into the occult as well. Well, underneath his house or office or base, whatever the heck this was, his dwelling, they found people that had been body parts removed and all kinds of strange things. And they were little kids, men, women, doesn't matter. And they were all under there. So we do know, like I said, they were into that stuff. And nothing really is coincidental for the most part, especially when it comes to certain individuals. I mean, all the areas that are considered a cult, whether it was Hauska Castle or anywhere like that. Well, guess who was right there? Yeah, the dirty stash and Heinrich Himmler and all their little goons are in every single one of those areas. Dracula's castle, another one. Why did they go to all these places? Okay, I mean, it can't just be for what's the word I'm looking for? I don't like to swear, but you know how they say crafts and giggles or whatever. They can't just be for that.
Oh, yeah. That's very true. And you look at someone like Vlad Tepes, the original Dracula. By the way, that name Dracula comes from the fact that his father was the son of the dragon, which was a Teutonic order, an order of knights, sons of the dragon, and that's where you get the name Dracula. But in Romania, he is considered a national hero, very much like our George Washington. But he kept the supposed hordes of the Muslims back out of his country, and he sent them a very strong signal by staking all of them up, thousands upon thousands of them. That was just his sort of publicity way of saying, "Hey, this is going to happen to you if you come into our land." He did some very rough things, but he did it for, I'm not going to say the right reasons, but he did it for, I think, justifiable reasons in some way. And if you can justify something like that. But it took a dark power to do that. I mean, he would stake thousands of people and then sit down and eat dinner in the middle of it. That's pretty bad.
Right, man? Yeah, like you said, that's definitely pretty bad right there for sure. And before I let you get going, it actually popped into my head as well. There was a woman that I don't know if she was a queen or princess or a priestess, but she was supposed to have been beautiful and she bathed in the blood of virgins she preferred from local villages and stuff, and she would have her henchmen more or less go out and collect these women, telling them that they're going to have this luxurious night, and then she would bathe in their blood. Do you know who I'm referring to? Because I can't remember her name right off top hand, but she is in history also.
And, her name was the Countess Elizabeth Bathory. She believed Bathory believed that you could bathe in the blood of virgins, you could retain your youth and beauty.
Yes, that is her. So what ever happened to her in history, if you know? Because I can't really figure out what happened, because like apparently she was beautiful and was staying beautiful,
They
but
actually locked her up in cell because she was royalty. They couldn't unalive her, so they locked her in a cell and they gave her a mirror and said, "Here, now you can sit day after day and watch yourself grow old." That would be the worst punishment to her you could think of.
so then she just perished with elderliness. Okay. Wow. All right. That is, again, got to have some sort of something going on there. I mean, sure, I guess if you are a
Yep.
beautiful woman bathing in blood, you'd still be beautiful at that point in time. But apparently, she almost looked perfect, which I mean, hey, people can look perfect, but it is kind of weird that all of a sudden she stopped that and then immediately gets put in this room and just starts aging quite quickly. Yeah, it's strange.
Yep. They knew how to get rid of their problems back in the old days. But she was quite a character, and supposedly there are rumors that she was a true vampire and that she still exists, that she's still out there somewhere.
Yeah, that's why I figured, as a way to kind of wrap this up, I wanted to bring that up because it was just such a strange, interesting topic, like you said, but it again just shows somebody else throughout history that had this belief that ties into the occult. And at the end of the night, I don't know. There's so much that is occurring with the occult side of things too. And I mean, I believe with like the cynocephaly and like we had said, the cave hyenas, that's all occurring too. But then with like the werewolves and man, what the heck was Heinrich Himmler and the Dirty Sets? What were they all doing here? Okay. They were obviously doing something and, messing around with some sort of aspects. And then we have all the historical stuff that you just touched on too. So no, man, it's mind blowing, dude. And I appreciate you stopping in and hanging out with us and just really blowing some more minds. And I definitely look forward to in a few weeks getting you back on for sure, man.
Anytime, my brother. Always a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for making it this far tonight. Please like, comment, subscribe, and feed the algorithm. Share the facts, and remember, there are things that go bump in the night.